Everybody, and welcome to track presentation C1. This is in track 10, Basic Research and Theory in Immersive Learning. And I'm very pleased today to welcome two gentlemen from the Kyoto University of Foreign Studies, Angus McGregor and Eric Hawkinson. And they'll be talking about their paper number 124, which is titled WebVR in the Facilitation of Model United Nations Simulations. I hope everybody's having a great conference. This is going to be an amazing session. And all right, gentlemen, take it away.
Hey, Angus, do you want to introduce us and get us going at the beginning here?
Thank you, Eric, for getting all the technical problems set up right there at 8 o'clock. So did it. Way to go. Greetings, everybody, from Kyoto, Japan, where both Eric and I are based. We're colleagues at Kyoto University of Foreign Studies, which is a four-year university. We work in the Faculty of Global Engagement. Eric is in Sustainable Tourism, International Tourism Department, and I myself in Global Studies. I think we all are happy to see that the world is slowly moving out of this pandemic state of mind that we've been in. Japan has just recently announced that it will be opening its doors to a lot of international visitors, tourists later this month. Many European countries, North American countries have already done so. But as many of us have experienced the last 2 years, we were pretty much remotely teaching in an online environment. Both in Eric and I teaching our university classes remotely and canceling a lot of events. I myself am very involved in Model United Nations and education. For the past 30 years as an educator, Model United Nations has been a very integral part of the learning process that I like to convey with my students. In 2019, an annual conference I'm involved with university students and also with high school students, had to go online as a lot of events. And through the use of Google platforms and Zoom, we were able to successfully move the conference online. Eric has a lot more experience with VR and AR technology. I'm sure we'll speak about that as a learning futurist a little later on. And so we were able to put our heads together and come up by combining our interests to come up with a plan to kind of put together a pilot project that will merge our educational interests of Model United Nations with AR and VR technologies. And so we've put together a very small simulation with just 7 students that would mimic a Model United simulation, and that could take place virtually in an environment that Eric created. And before I go into anything further, maybe Eric, you'd like to say a few words before we roll the video.
Sure. Yes, very happy to be here. My name's Eric. I work at the same university here with Angus, and we've been partnering on a bunch of different stuff. When I first started with TEDx Kyoto, he was there to kind of introduce me to the wonderful community there, and then from there we got into doing a wonderful array of different types of projects together, and I've been trying to find new kind of avenues to find better affordances to virtual and augmented reality. My main interests are in augmented reality, but since the pandemic, that has had to shift because a lot of my augmented reality initiatives kind of were asking people to kind of congregate and do things together in person. So I made a couple of new environments, and the Model United Nations seemed like a very good place to do a pilot study in which Angus was very gracious enough to work with me, and he's been wonderful in showing me the wonderful world of the Model United Nations and all the good it's doing for developing diplomacy and future leaders for not just Japan, for all of the world, and mostly Southeast Asia in our case. And it is my hope that these simulations can lead to further and more meaningful kind of iterations of using this technology for the students that unfortunately can't come to Japan to have these simulations live, or even not so much even in the Zoom situation here in Japan. I think we want to, in the case of saving time, right, Angus, we're going to show you the video that we created that will run through the study, the pilot study, and everything that we've done leading up to it. And then we'll kind of recap. I have some other things I can show you about the virtual environment and its development and things that went into designing it and how it was deployed. And Angus is here also, of course, to tell you about the simulation that was put through this environment and the good and the bad and the ugly and the affordances that came along with doing this in this virtual environment. How we doing, Angus? Anything to add before we get this going?
No, I think that's good. Let's roll the video, and then we can see where that leads us after that. Hello, my name is Angus McGregor, and today, along with my colleague Eric Hawkinson, both of us from Kyoto University of Foreign Studies, we would like to share with you the early stages of a research project we are currently working on, which is the use of WebVR in the facilitation of Model United Nations simulations. Model United Nations simulation, Model United Nations rather, MUN, is an academic simulation where students role play as delegates to the United Nations, working together to solve global issues before the United Nations agenda while representing their assigned country's national interests. A typical MUN event would look something like this. Students are using parliamentary procedures to move in and out of formal and informal consultations with each other. They're delivering speeches, they're debating, and they're workshopping with other delegates to craft together policy proposals to present to the larger caucus. Here in Japan, we're involved with the Japan University English Model United Nations Conference, which is an annual MUN event for about 170 students, both Japanese and international, most of them EFL, or English as a Foreign Language Learners. The conference was moved online in 2020 and 2021 as a result of the COVID pandemic. Now, at both online and face-to-face Model United Nations events, in the classroom, outside of the classroom, it's a great way to teach global issues, develop public speaking skills, develop more global awareness, and to work on students' research skills. However, what I've noticed is that because students are so concentrated on working on these skills and preparing as for an all-English conference, they rarely really develop their negotiating strategies and their ability to agree and disagree in a diplomatic manner. So we were interested in exploring how we could get somewhat from this stagnant video meeting style, which was a great alternative to canceling the event, back to something that resembled, even if in an online environment, more the intimate and personal negotiating situations that appear at a face-to-face Model United Nations meeting. So we decided to keep the simulation small. We went with the United Nations Security Council, which has 15 member nations, and created a replica of the United Nations Security Council chambers there in New York City. We were going to explore, could students negotiate a consensus-building statement? Could they do so while protecting their national interests? And how could the avatar negotiating experience assist them in preparing for a real face-to-face Model UN experience? In keeping it small, we decided to limit our roles to 7 student delegates. 5 would be the permanent members of the Security Council, and then 2 important stakeholders, the director from the United Nations Assistance Mission to Afghanistan and a representative from the former Afghanistan government. The crisis scenario that the students would be working towards crafting a statement about was the United States withdrawal from Afghanistan that had happened this last year in August. The students were tasked with drafting a international statement called a official statement on behalf of the United Nations Security Council. Faculty prepared the background guides and the role objectives for each of the 7 roles,
And 3 sessions were organized, an orientation and then 2 meetings. Each of the meetings, students were able to move back and forth from formal and informal consultations using parliamentary rules and procedures. And this is an example of what they did.
China is concerned on how can we all work together and be able to help Afghanistan and the Taliban. China supports all statements that call on the Taliban to follow international governing standards and respect the rights of all citizens, including women and girls, in order to be able to negotiate with the Taliban on aid and the future of China-Afghanistan relations. Therefore, China is willing to work with the Taliban to ensure a smooth transition towards a new government and expresses that the international community will support China's plan to be more involved in developing the Central Asia region and play a more active role in maintaining regional peace and security.
The floor is now open.
President?
Yes, United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. The United Kingdom is in favor of the idea of the United States of having the Security Council in multilateral conversations. Therefore, the United Kingdom is disagree with the idea of having a bilateral conversation with Taliban, which the idea proposed by Russia and China. Thank you. Do we have to build the camps in their neighboring countries and not in our countries? That was because we were concerning about the traveling distance between Afghanistan
Sorry to interrupt. China is asking to talk to France. So.
Oh, why France?
Ciao.
So we were concerning about the long travel distance between our countries and Afghanistan. So it's very easy.
So, could students negotiate a consensus-building statement? Well, yes, they quickly went about moving around the chambers into the public spaces, as also the private meeting rooms. They proposed 16 draft clauses to the statement, and through negotiating with each other, they were able to whittle that down to 11 clauses, which were drafted and then agreed upon later on. Could they do so while protecting their national interests? Well, I think so. Russia and China quickly aligned their interests and called for bilateral negotiations with the Taliban. The U.S., U.K., and France adamantly opposed that, opting to promote multilateral negotiations instead. And how could this experience with the avatar assist in preparing for a face-to-face experience? Well, I think you could see using it as a positive tool. Something that can be utilized as students prepare for online simulations as well as face-to-face simulations, a zone for practicing, if you will, negotiating strategies that they're learning in the classroom. Here are 7 student comments after the event was over, the simulation. I think they were very positive. Students really enjoyed it. They felt it really assisted them in preparing for the Model United Nations.
Hi, my name's Eric, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how we put together this simulation as far as the technology and how we got to build this environment and iterate on it to facilitate these simulations in WebVR. We used A-Frame, which is an extension of HTML that allows the creation of 3D environments using any standard web browser. This makes it very accessible. And so A-Frame is key in facilitating WebVR, and we used a particular built service called FrameVR to host these A-Frame environments. And we built a custom environment using Blender 3D environment that replicated the Model United Nations Security Council chamber for this simulation as well. The students were mostly on laptops, and it was mostly Mac OS users using Safari as a means to access the WebVR. There were a couple of Windows 10 users as well. None of the participants had any experience in WebVR before this, so we had to do some onboarding train them a little bit about how to move around and interact with things inside of a virtual space using WebVR. That was done in Microsoft Teams. And a lot of what happens as far as the activities go in Model United Nations is the drafting of documents or the putting together of some sort of, or facilitating some sort of resolution of some sort. And that required, in this case, to use collaborative documents from G Suite. So the actual environment itself, we took some floor plans, took some reference photos, and there's actually a couple of 360 photos out there to actually recreate the environment in virtual space. It wasn't to scale, and it ended up looking a little bit like this, which isn't exactly like the floor plan in real life. We added some rooms to facilitate breakout rooms. We had to adjust the spatial audio to allow for private conversations in these spaces inside of virtual reality, and extra spaces between the chairs and the tables and desks, and an extra kind of floor or two in the lobby to facilitate the facilitators, for example, welcoming people into the space and telling them where to go, and etc. Right? So, considering just a couple of points moving forward for the next iteration, or ones that we had to deal with while iterating through the process as we went through these simulations for this pilot study, the collaborative document creation in WebVR. So, as I mentioned earlier, you have to create resolutions, you have to write documents. That meant leaving VR to actually work on these documents. There were some, in our simulations, there were some people in VR looking at a document being typed up, but you couldn't actually type in the VR environment. I have some other design considerations or possible changes to the actual activity itself to make that more conducive to using virtual reality. That could be moving the drafting portion more asynchronous, or having some sort of pick and choose type scenario where the actual user interface of bringing parts of resolution here, where the people inside of VR could actually pick up and place in, drop in canned items perhaps in the drafting of the resolutions. So that no typing was needed. Audio levels, sometimes you can eavesdrop depending on the spatial audio, so you have to maybe kind of make private zones, for example. Universal design, different levels of technology ability, different technology tools. Some had better bandwidth than others, and also being able to hear and see or actually label items in virtual reality is a constant design issue when trying to think about these environments as well. Access and privacy and data collection are all kind of put into the choice of using WebVR. You're going through the stack of using the browser and knowing where, giving access to your camera and your microphone to that browser. The other issues involved with that, WebVR, giving access to people coming in, to people who know that, for example, that where that website is, you have to put up perhaps a login or some sort of block, so you don't get the Zoom bombing equivalent of somebody coming into your VR space. All those considerations and more are talked about in this study and other studies on my website. You can see some other VR environments that we're doing in similar studies. Please visit Together Learning for those environments and erichawkinson.com for those studies. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Bye. All right. Hey, thanks very much for paying attention and watching that short film. I do have a couple of comments to add to, possibly, but Angus, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Go ahead. I'll follow you, Eric. Go ahead.
Oh, right. So talking about the actual creation of the space and actually doing this for this reason, I was very keen on trying to use virtual reality for this kind of simulation, because I felt that there's a lot of affordance to having a physical space when doing these types of situations. One of the things that I witnessed, like when I watched some videos of the simulations in Zoom is the attention to their fellow diplomats and their spacing between them and approaching different people and actually having to physically go from one room to another to conference was kind of a powerful thing in this case. But like I said in the video, the drafting of resolutions was partly problematic because still typing inside of virtual reality, especially WebVR, is not really that a great of an experience. So you actually have to leave and come back, and therefore you have kind of absent avatars for spaces of time. And for the next iteration, I hope that we can work around the design on that particular issue. All right, Angus, anything else?
Yes. One thing that I would like to just point out and kind of reiterate is that this was a very good opportunity for students to kind of practice in a safe environment, a gaming environment, if you will, the use of negotiating strategies that they were learning in the classroom or that they have developed over a few years of participating in numerous online and face-to-face Model United Nations. I talked about this a little bit in the video, but one of the things that many faculty have noticed about some of our Japanese Model United Nations is the unwillingness of Japanese students to get in there and use some of their negotiating skills to really kind of play hardball and negotiate in a very professional or a diplomatic way. Part of that is culture. Part of that is also confidence with the language. They are English language learners. So debate in a foreign language is quite a high proficiency skill. Now, these are high-level language learners, but possibly the opportunity to really get out of their comfort zone and debate is something that they weren't willing to do so often. But here in this virtual zone and environment, they kind of felt freer, and it was also a gaming like environment, so they felt a little freer to explore how they could possibly hold on to their national interests a little stronger, hold on to their position when negotiating with someone who had a very different opinion, and explore some of the techniques that we have asked them to use in Model United Nations conferences, but have been somewhat reluctant to do so. So I see this as a very good way to help train students to participate in both Japanese domestic Model United Nations and for teams who travel to international events, either New York City, Washington, D.C., The Hague. We're involved with a community of MUNers here in Japan who like to travel the world when they get the opportunity to participate in these conferences. Also, the other logical conclusion to take this is to organize international simulations online in virtual reality where they can role play with actual students from other countries in other time zones like we are doing here at the iLearn conference. So phase 2 of our study, Eric and I hope to broaden our horizons with this simulation, to open it up to some other universities so we can have some intra-university experience and participants and take it global. Step by step, we're at the first stage, but I think there's some interesting things that can be done here, and I haven't seen other people doing this yet. So we would be interested to hear also your comments and some suggestions and advice as well as questions on what you have seen here today so far. So maybe, Eric, if that's okay, we could open it up for some questions. Or Michael, would you like to chair that, moderate that?
Jonathan has a question over there. Oh.
Yeah, I have a question.
Please go ahead.
how easy it is to create bespoke simulations for your, for the simulations that you want to create?
This particular service that we use is very popular amongst this community here with the iLearn community. It's called Frame VR. It's using the open WebVR standard, and you can create free accounts with it. And with that platform, there is a variety of pre-built environments for you to use. And if you use one of those pre-built environments, it's very simple, very easy to get going. Maybe one of the things that I learn about doing this more often when I take on partners like Angus is trying to onboard people to facilitate their own needs. And Angus, I think, is a self-proclaimed not such a techie person. Hopefully that's not too rude to say, but I mean, he was able to get into these environments and use them with his students with just a little bit of onboarding. Now, for this particular simulation, I created a digital twin of the Model United Nations, and that required some 3D modeling, which probably if you're going to be starting out and creating in these environments, that's a little bit of a learning curve, and it takes a little bit of time to learn some of that. The software used is Blender, and that's also free, but that probably is not immediately accessible to create your own environments using this particular platform. But you can import your own photos, your own videos, import 3D models from other free sources that wouldn't take that much effort. But to create an entirely new environment like we did in this one would take a little bit more effort. But like I said, there's a lot of free options that are available.
Great. So Jonathan, you had a question. Would you like to just, or should I read it from the chat?
Yeah, no problem, Mike. Well, first of all, I definitely wanted to congratulate Eric and Angus on a fantastic and intriguing presentation. As I had mentioned in the chat previously, my daughter, Sophia, was involved in the Model United Nations all throughout high school, and then has really enjoyed it in her college years, just finished up being the captain of the team there, and just really met so many friends and learned so much about policy and dialogue and coming to solutions. I definitely don't want to get into an argument with her now, but just was wondering, a couple of things. I know that when you use Frame VR, it's like most web VR programs, there's a kind of a limitation on the number of people or resources that you can put into a frame, and was curious as to how many concurrent Model United Nations students have been in a frame at one time.
You mind if I field that one, Angus?
Oh, please do.
Okay.
That question's go directly to Eric.
Right. When I first started talking to Angus about designing something in VR, he immediately started kind of thinking about their normal sessions that they do, which kind of replicate the General Assembly, which has hundreds of people coming in and out of it. And WebVR, no matter what the platform, is not conducive to that many concurrent users. So we immediately had to start brainstorming new kind of simulations to use this environment. So that's when Angus suggested the Security Council, which has the 7 members. And so we had only 7 participants, is that right, Angus, in this particular pilot study?
7 student participants, yes.
And they each had their own representative country or institution, and they ran the gambit of 3 stages of the simulation, from onboarding to resolution drafting and such. I have a video that I prepared actually that can show you the 3 steps that we went to if we want to show that. It takes about a minute.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, if I could just follow up a little bit. Jonathan, I think that's great. Congratulations to your daughter for her immune experience, both at Princeton and being chaplain captain. Model Unit is a great educational event. I've been involved with it as an educator for 30 years. I did my first one in high school back in the early 80s at a World Food Conference, and it just kind of went from there. At a large model United Nations, General Assemblies happen, but there's also a lot of committees, and Security Council simulations are an actual part of a larger model United Nations event. This would work well for smaller committee meetings. Security Council, I don't quite see how it could work with a large General Assembly at the moment where the technology is right now. As Eric said, I think that would just be a little bit too cumbersome for that many people. In more small, intimate sessions, the students really enjoyed being able to freely move around the environment, to find a private room, to have a discussion with 3 or 4 people, to negotiate, and then to come back to a larger room where we had more formal consultations where they were speaking using parliamentary procedures. Between the 3 sessions that Eric has just mentioned, we also gave we ran this over 3 weeks. So we gave them a week between each session to prepare. We gave them directives and objectives for them to work on, to bring to the next meeting. And that also helped them to to have some confidence in participating in this. So smaller is better, I think, at this point. I could see it doubling in size and maybe running with 15 students, possibly 20. But I really am not the tech person, I'm more of a content guy when it comes to this stuff. So I'd have to kind of defer to the tech people on how many people they could actually fit in the room.
It is technically possible to fit more members in WebVR, but I have noticed, especially amongst our students, as soon as you start the more people you pile into WebVR, the more bandwidth, the more processing power is required on the user end, which then we start to get into digital divide type issues with the students and their personal devices.
Well, thank you guys. My second part of that was, I think the Model United Nations model is pretty incredible from what I've learned, and I've actually sort of interrogated my daughter about it over the years a little bit because I find it very fascinating, and would love to chat with you both if you're interested at some point about the use of like the frame VR in the current way that you're doing it, working with other Model United Nations groups in other places of the world that might culminate in an event here on the iLearn campus. And we'd love to chat with you about ways we might partner and facilitate something like that, if you're interested.
Sure, I'd love to talk about that.
Great. Yeah, let's find a time to chat. Thank you.
Be great. Thank you.
Perfect. We have another question from Marie-Luce. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, I could ask the question. I was just wondering if you're planning to stick with VR once the students will be able to get back together face to face. You see many benefits in VR that will make you stick to it, or is it like a temporary thing? Because I think you mentioned it being what triggered this was the pandemic situation that prevented students to get together.
Yeah, what do you think, Angus? You want to continue this even though we can do face-to-face or not?
Yes, we do have face-to-face events coming up. I'm actually involved with 3 Model UN conferences, the end of June and the 1st of July, from the high school to the university level. And as a Model UN organizer and teacher, I will say face-to-face is the way to go. And I'm looking forward, after 2 years of being back in a face-to-face environment. One conference is a hybrid conference, and it's going to be 1 day online and 1 day face-to-face. I think, though, that this can be a very good tool to help students in the classroom interact cross borders with other students in preparing for Model United Nations. And we have Model United Nations as part of the curriculum, Kyoto University of Foreign Studies. And I know some other universities in Japan and in other countries also have the same. And it would be interesting to be able to connect the virtual simulation with face-to-face simulations in the preparation process. So I would like to continue exploring this. This is all very new to me, and it's been kind of a sink or swim type of experience. but I'm now getting much more comfortable in the environment and see that it has great potential, I think, for not only motivating students to join, maybe there would be also an environment where some students who were very reluctant to join a face-to-face model United Nations or were unable to might find that this would be a nice environment for them to get involved with. So yes, I would like to continue. Eric?
Yeah, well, on the learning design lens with this, I agree with Angus. Face-to-face is probably best, but I can really see this becoming. I've already thought about designing sort of an onboarding curriculum per se for helping students get into their first face-to-face Model United Nations experience through virtual reality. So we've already done this a lot with our research group here in Japan, called MAVE, or Mixed Augmented Virtual Realities and Learning Group, with things like public speaking anxiety reduction, study abroad, pre-departure, preparation and things like that. So in that same vein, I think this could be a really powerful tool to train for Model United Nations.
Yeah, definitely. I can see how that would be a great tool for preparation. I know, to go to a big event like that is going to be, I think, kind of stressful for a lot of people. So if they can have an arena to practice and kind of have an idea of what they're going to be doing ahead of time, that would be, I think, really helpful to a lot of students. Do we have any other questions? You could raise your hand or type into the chat. I actually had a question about the onboarding process that you talked about in Teams. How fast was it to train the kids to use the system, and what were kind of the reactions that you got?
Angus, you want to talk about that, or you want me to field that one?
Well, I think you ran that session, but it took 90 minutes, didn't it?
Well, yeah, I would say it was varied. We had some boys in the group that were gamers, and they felt right at home, and they kind of jumped in and figured things out on their own. And we had a couple of other people that needed a little help and needed a little technical support, so they needed like maybe an extra 10, 15 minutes on the side, and helping figure out this way and that. And maybe there was one person in particular that had some technical problems getting in and out of the space with her. Maybe I think it was maybe her hardware situation was failing her from time to time, but for the most part, they did great. I think didn't take much at all.
Wonderful. So you didn't find hardware too much of an issue then, just in that one case, really?
Yeah, as far as I can tell, just in that one case, there, especially with the WebVR, you have one of the big technical things that gets caught up on is the security issues with allowing the website to access your webcam and your microphone. There's always different security protocols and issues depending on what browser you have and what operating system you're running. So that's a little bit. So it could be more difficult to troubleshoot with the students depending on what they have going on their particular situation. And I think that's what was tripping up this one particular student. But for the most part, it went pretty smoothly. Angus probably needed more help than the students from time to time.
That's right. And Mike, if I could just follow up, I think we knew that it would be difficult or it would be a new environment. So we chose students who were very experienced Model United Nation participants. So we already knew the ins and outs. They were comfortable with the content and the process. And as I said in the presentation, we pre-wrote their objectives and goals and their background guides. So they didn't have to come with too much of their own research to this particular event. They do have to at regular Model United Nations conferences. And that was allowed them to just concentrate on making sure that they could understand and be comfortable with the tech and how to move around the room. The student Eric's referring to had some trouble navigating the environment and kept bumping into the wall and couldn't get out of the corner and kept talking to the corner. So that was one issue. But I was very impressed how quickly they became pretty fluid at moving from private rooms to public rooms and keeping their conversations private or public. So that was, they were very quick to jump in and get it done.
Great. Jonathan, I see you had a comment there in the chat. Maybe if you'd like, you could maybe share it with the group through voice as well.
Sure. Yeah, I was just thinking it would be really fun to look at the use of virtual reality to model different simulations visually going on around the world that the United Nations, the model United Nations could see and interact with for the students to engage in. That might really help to understand conflicts and to understand perspectives, help them sort of embody the role playing in different ways. That would be really neat. Any thoughts on that?
Jonathan, one thing, as you just mentioned, though, the role play experience, and that students are to take on the actual persona of a diplomat from another country. And sometimes at the beginner level within the United Nations, it's hard for students to make leap into, I'm not here to present my opinion, I'm here to present the opinions of Bangladesh or France or China, Russia. I'm doing a simulation at the university now that's face-to-face with freshmen, and we are simulating the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and simulating the United Nations High Commission for Refugees and its response to helping these refugees. And it's really hard for someone who's role-playing as Russia right now to jump in and do that. But when I talk to him about, this is a game, this is a simulation, think of it as a game, they go, oh, if I can just play it as a game, I'd love to do that. And so, as you mentioned, it would be it's an interesting way to introduce students through VR to the real world of diplomacy and global issues. So I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, I can see that would be really, really interesting. Thanks. Yeah, cool. My mind's really racing now.
He got me thinking about something too. Like, have some onboarding kind of immersive tools to set up the scenarios for these might be really interesting. So like have a 360 video of where you're sat down by like somebody from the representing Russia and tell you like this is what you need to represent, this is what we're sending you there for, and kind of put them through the empathy machine, as we refer to it a lot in this research, right? Be great.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. I can see, how a lot of video games have a kind of a story, a start to the story where you're sitting there and you're introduced to who you are and what you are, and I could see that being an amazing experience there.
One thing, Michael, just real quick, and within that experience, this was an ongoing, like a 6-week course, for example. The simulation could grow based on how the students solve certain problems and conflicts each week. And it could be a reaction, or so it could really kind of be a real-time experience, if you will, in that the scenarios will change based on what the students do here in that environment over a 6-week period. So.
Oh yeah. No, I think you've got us all thinking about a lot of possibilities here. And how all of us and students, just anybody could technology to really create situations, put ourselves into situations and other people as well, to feel that empathy and compassion. Daphne, would you like to ask another question?
Yeah, I mean, what the things that you're mentioning now in terms of creating a successful simulation is very interesting, but it makes it difficult. It goes back to the question that I did at the beginning of how easy it is to create bespoke simulations. And you answered that by saying that Frame VR offers tools to modify the environment, create the environment, but it's if you start wanting to integrate in the environment avatars that they have a specific role. Yesterday we had the feature talk that they presented characters with a certain personality and ability to reason and respond or take position, which is what you want in a situation like this, because the scope of these simulations is students to not only to be able to defend a position but also to listen to how other people to the formal language that is used from diplomats in these occasions to to take a specific position. So if you want to start creating simulation cases like this, if you want to start integrating game elements in a simulation, which is something that we try to do in the University of Westminster, it becomes pretty hard technically, because then it requires technical skills from the tutors that you do not necessarily have. So, it's not a question, actually, it's a point with that I wanted to make, that the tools, they need to tools like FrameVR, they need to grow, enabling tutors to create bespoke simulations to satisfy their educational needs. I think.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Did either of you want to comment on that, or? Okay, Doug, you have a question?
I agreed mostly, but what you said, I was waiting for Angus because I thought that he might be able to answer something. Did you want to add something on that, Angus?
Oh, I agree as well. And I think there's a lot of linguistic preparations that go into it, as research studies, as far as creating different game scenarios. And it's research that I look forward to getting deeper into as we move through it. So, yes.
One thing that I could comment on is, as for me, myself, of creating these environments and designing them and putting all these interactive elements in there is, it's my passion. It's what I love to do. But a lot of the people, for somebody like Angus, of course, what he does with the model names is amazing, and that's why I wanted to partner with him. But in the case of most educators, they don't have either somebody that's technically proficient or willing and able to give the time and effort to put in and design these environments. So you're absolutely correct.
Awesome. Doug,
I mean, if you
sorry.
allow me to this, I would like to add that even if, on the other hand, even if you provide a tool that enables the educators to create all these bespoke scenarios and to add milestones, to add all the gamification required in there. Again, what is needed is a kind of a framework for, sometimes students won't necessarily know what to do with all this. So there is also a need of a framework and a guidance for educators to help them and support them in making purposeful use of these tools.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I think Model 9 Nations worked very well in this particular case, because it was more Socratic and wasn't very asynchronous, and it was there it was being guided by Angus and me there technically, and so the students had guidance and they had meaning and purpose for being in that virtual space. So that ticked a few boxes for me as far as the affordance goes, for me anyway.
One last tricky question. Is this environment open for other educators to use? Can we use it if we want to?
I think we can arrange something. I don't have it open to the general public, but if you want to use it, I think we can arrange something, yes.
I'll bring you in contact with my colleagues at the Department of Politics and International Relations at the University of Westminster, that they tried really hard to create something similar. So I'll bring you in touch.
Sure. Love to.
Awesome. Doug, you had a question?
Yes, I wanted to know how the use of the simulation environment changed student grading, and did you use a rubric?
Oh. Well, That's a very good question. And for this study, this was a volunteer study that was done outside of the classroom. So this was not related to a class that they were taking necessarily or a rubric. So that wasn't part of phase one. If we are successful in convincing the department to add this to the curriculum, we will have to definitely consider that.
How is that done face-to-face, Angus? Can you give us a little hint about how you would grade a person in a face-to-face situation? Is that with a rubric, or is that part of their grade when to participate and how they participate?
It really depends on different teachers, of course. The way we do it in the institutions that I work in, we grade more on the preparation process and less on the actual participation, because it's also hard for the teacher to observe so many students and so many different committees at a large Model United Nations event. There are speeches that have to be written. There are reports and papers that have to be written and turned in, official statements, position papers. And then at the end there, one thing that we do is they have to write a report back to their government, what the conference was, what they achieved at the conference, what they did not achieve, and how what the conference decided was the way for the international community to move forward. That's how we assess in the classrooms that I work.
Did you ever use, perhaps maybe when you went, I know there was an interim time when you were in Zoom between the virtual simulations and when you went to emergency remote teaching. Did you ever refer to perhaps Zoom recordings for any type of assessment?
We did not assess the actual Zoom records. There is a way to do that, but once again, it was all about the prep.
Okay, yeah, just brainstorming in my head how that assessment might work in a virtual space with that. Thanks.
Right.
All right, great.
Doug, does that a good enough answer for you? Does that help, or?
It does help, and so I am brand new to iLearn and immersive environments, and I'm in the course of developing a class on how you use these technologies. So you did inform what I'm thinking about. I think my question points to, in a virtual world or in a virtual environment, there are so many things you can assess. But I think what you said about that was a good follow-up that someone mentioned about what you do currently. There is evidence there of what students learned from papers in the face-to-face class, from interactions that they have to have in class. So I think maybe that's a starting point for me. Take what I have and see how I can lay it on top of the virtual environment and then see where we are.
Yes, I agree. And I think, that process, and if they're not being graded somewhat on the product, if you will, the actual performance within the virtual environment, it sometimes takes some pressure off of them to just kind of be freer to kind of go with where they feel necessary to go and not necessarily have to meet certain goals and objectives that may be based on a rubric for grading purposes.
I think it's really great that you are tackling global issues using the technology. I think that's a path forward. And one of the things that I want to implement in the course that I'm developing, which is not a virtual course, it's going to be based in Blackboard LMS, but students are going to actually attack problems of practice or real world problems. And I want to see what they do with the technology that you're demonstrating here. And I'm not quite sure yet how to score that, but they're going to have a deliverable. So you've given me some ideas about how to do that. So thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck with that project.
Thank you. I'll be talking about it tomorrow if you want to attend the live session in Vienna.
Oh yeah, fly us on out. We'll be there.
Nice.
Alrighty, so we just have a few minutes left. Did Eric, Angus, did you guys want to make a final statement?
Before we run out of time, if it's okay with you, Angus, I want to mention I have a second session in, I don't know, what is it? another 4 or 5 hours from now. I'm going to be up all night here in Japan. It's 4 a.m. for us, where I'm going to be talking about another kind of global initiative that I've started called the My Hometown Project to put forth virtual reality to help with the loss of the ability to do study abroad programs. One of my most passionate and most, I don't know, I'm just so happy and so pleased with the way this project is going. And so this is in a practitioner stream that's going to be held, I think it's 4 a.m. Japan time. I don't quite remember what time it is in Vienna, but it's going to be held in the practitioner stream. You can look that up a little bit later. It's called Exploring Immersive Storytelling for a Post-19 Tourism Industry, because I teach a lot of classes here in the School of Global Tourism, and the students have been studying hospitality and tourism in some of my courses, and we've been using virtual reality for them to design, curate, and get vocational training in the creation and curation of tours. And when we pivoted to emergency remote teaching, it just turned into something spectacular. So I want to share a little bit more about that project in a later session if you might be interested in joining.
Thank you both. This has been a really great session, and thank you everybody for attending. And I guess we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you, everybody, and contact information's in my profile if you're interested in networking a little bit on Model United Nations, globalist education, Japan. Let us know. We're very open and flexible, willing to talk.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And willing to dance, too.
Don't know how to do that.
Thanks for your time, everybody. We really appreciate it. And we're hoping, if you want to, you see my website up there in the corner there, erichawkinson.com. And initiatives in immersive learning on that particular website, or those websites, a lot of other research that I've published in the last 10 years or so in this area. So happy to collaborate and hear from you about any of those other projects as well. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.